What's shaking Booktube? My name's Cam, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be chatting about, or reviewing, as the kids would say nowadays. I'm going to be chatting about the Devouring Gray.
What is your plan? Why do you do it, man?
Devouring Gray, more like Devouring Great. Okay, that's enough. We like to have fun here. We like to have fun at Wolfshot Publishing. Devouring Gray is a brand new YA novel by debut author Christine Lynn Herman, and it's a book that pretty much everyone's talking about at the moment. I think I might be the only person on Booktube who didn't get a copy from Disney Hyperion. Not that, I mean, I don't accept books in exchange for reviews anyway, but there were a lot of people receiving this book as a sponsorship by Disney. Not that that's an issue, I'm just saying it's pretty big on Booktube at the moment. A lot of people have been saying that it's, you know, it's their new favorite book, it's incredible, it blew their mind, all this kind of stuff. And while I don't agree to that degree, it is a decent YA story. One of the best things about it, I think, is how you kind of recognize certain elements that feel like they're inspired by other things like other books, movies, and TV shows. Obviously, this review is going to be spoiler-free, but to name a few of those comparisons, Raven Boys is a big one. You might remember that was a book I actually DNF'd because I really didn't like it. This book is much, much better than Raven Boys, but there is a definite familiarity there. A bit of Stranger Things, kinda. A bit of Cruel Intentions. Even a bit of Hot Fuzz, which sounds weird, but trust me, once you read the book, you'll understand.
Shut it!
The book follows and goes through the POVs of a few different teenagers in this town called Four Paths, but the main character, I guess, would be the character Violet. She's a teenage girl that's just moved back to this town from New York, and she is part of one of four families within this town. While they aren't the cliche royal families, they may as well be, because they are the four major families of this town. They're the four families that everyone kind of worships to a certain degree. And the reason for that is that because it's well known within this town that there is a sort of parallel dimension that also acts as a prison for a monstrous creature. That's where it starts feeling a lot like Stranger Things. In fact, it's almost immediately comparing the Grey, which is Devouring Gray's limbo dimension, to the Upside Down, which is Stranger Things' limbo dimension. They're extremely similar. That, coupled with the fact the story centers around a group of teenagers, albeit older teenagers than Stranger Things, is pretty much where the similarities end. If you're expecting the charm of Stranger Things, you're just not going to find it in this story. That's not necessarily a con, because Stranger Things has a lot of things going for it in terms of charm, you know, 80s nostalgia, adorable kids with amazing chemistry, and, you know, really good music. The only reason I mention that is because if you are intending to read this because you've heard it being compared to Stranger Things, just know that it's similar in plot, not really in feel. So I mentioned Cruel Intentions before, and that's because if you took like the preppy, rich kids from Cruel Intentions and put them in the Stranger Things universe, you'd have a bit of a closer comparison to the Devouring Gray, except with, you know, less brother and sister kissing. And the kids aren't like massive assholes or anything. They're a bit cocky. I mean, there's a point in the story where they literally wear crowns. Anyway, the people in this town have pretty much accepted and are pretty good with the fact that these four families are meant to protect them from the creature, or keep at bay the creature that is trapped within this parallel dimension. I don't really understand why people would choose to live in this town. I mean, it's pretty much pointed out in the story that you could just move away. You wouldn't have to worry about a demonic creature. It explains why the four families stay there, but not so much everyone else, which is a bit weird, but I guess you wouldn't have a story without it, so. Anyway, Violet comes back and she's introduced to the other teenagers of these families. One thing I really like that Christine's done with this story is that they each have their own kind of little B stories. They've all got their own little kind of struggles of their own, and those struggles do intertwine towards the end of the story. So part of being descendants of these four families means they do have inherent abilities, or they're meant to have inherent abilities, and to kind of own these abilities, there is a bit of a ritual or a trial that they have to go through at a certain age. Some of the characters failed the trial, others didn't. So I'm sure it's become pretty abundantly clear at this point that this story does check off a lot of the YA cliche boxes, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is pretty vanilla as far as YA stories go. While this book does get more interesting towards the end, it can be a bit of a YA basic bitch from time to time, but I'll get to that. The biggest thing that the Devouring Gray has going for it is the relationships. I really like the complexity of some of the relationships. While they weren't immensely complex, they were, for the most part, pretty compelling. There were a lot of separate little dramas between some of these characters that at times did crisscross with each other, which you can tell Christine put a lot of effort into. The thing is, even with, like TV shows and movies as well, is sometimes when you have a bit of a large cast of angsty teenagers, they're just paired off into their own separate little, storyline dramas, but those dramas never have any impact with each other. For example, one of the characters' names is Isaac, and he's got a best friend relationship with the character Justin, but there's also the beginnings of a bit of a romance between him and the character of Violet. And those two relationships cause issues on each other, and not just that, but also cause issues on the relationship between Justin and Harper, which is another character. It's just a bit more realistic. In real life, when you've got a big group of friends, not that I'd know, relationship and friendship dramas do have a bit of a ripple effect, and that was done pretty well in this story. Personally, my favorite character would probably have to be Harper, and my favorite little relationship arc would be between Justin and Isaac. Now, once you do get to, I suppose, the really exciting part of the book, the suspense does have a really nice way of coming together. There were a lot of mysteries built up through this story that you might have not even realized at the time were mysteries that kind of come to fruition towards the end of the story, and do give you a few like, oh damn moments, you know what I mean? The town that the story's set in as well was also really cool. It's called 4 Paths, and it has that really creepy kind of claustrophobic just atmosphere where it's, I mean, this story is nothing like Wayward Pines, but the town environment is a bit similar in that it feels like there is a lot hidden there. If you were someone coming through the town as a tourist, I feel like you would be able to feel that there is a lot of history in that town, and it's all very closely guarded. It does make the town feel a bit dangerous and a bit creepy. As for the antagonists or the big bad creature itself, it was pretty plain. I mean, there's nothing particularly special about this creature that's trapped in the grey as far as comparing it to other imprisoned deity type creatures in other stories. It's pretty plain, but it's exciting enough to keep the story going. So I want to point out a few of the cons as well, and the first one I'm going to point out is the biggest one, and it's a reason why I didn't give this book, 5 or even 4 stars. Because the thing is, I really did enjoy this story and this book. I think it was really creative. I like the blending of, vanilla YA elements with the storyline of a small mysterious town where things aren't as they seem. Those are two things I generally enjoy on their own. Putting those together, I was pretty pleased. But there is one major issue I have with this story, and that is pretty much just the way the plot was paced. For the first probably nearly half of the book, I came pretty damn close to DNFing it a lot of times, and I think a lot of other people will as well. I was pretty much convinced it was going to be just a pretty crap read, to be honest. The pacing was excruciatingly close, and somehow, even with the pacing being so slow, we were introduced to all of the characters way too quickly. I mean, in the first small number of pages, we've been introduced to literally every major character that you'll meet through the story. That's all done at the very beginning of the story, and it's a bit overwhelming because there's quite a cast of characters. And like I pointed out before as a pro, the characters and all of their relationships with each other are important to the plot of the story. Even characters like the parents of the teenagers are interesting in their own ways, and their own stories and relationships with the other parents have a huge part and are really compelling, and that's all great, but that's all kind of thrust at you immediately as soon as you start reading, and that's a real issue. While I truly believe it does pay off towards the end and it is worth it, I never want to be one of those people that use that as an excuse or a recommendation. I don't think the end of a book being good or even being one of the best you've ever read excuses the first half of the book or more being bad. Literally the first 3/4 of the book have no real major occurrences. Like if you were to list out all of the major events of the story, in a dot point format, out of like 10 dot points, only 2 of them would be the first half or 3/4 of the book. So for that reason, yeah, I had to dock a few points. I just don't agree with being lenient for that much reading not being enjoyable just because it has a satisfying payoff. I feel like you can still have the great payoff and still be entertaining the rest of the way. It's also a bit of an odd story structure I've noticed. So the conventional story timeline is that there is build up, climax, and then a steady ride out of the story. With this one, it's a bit more like a heart monitor where it's just like nothing's really happening, all of a sudden, bloop, nothing's really happening, all of a sudden, bloop. When there is an exciting part of the story, it happens very suddenly. There's almost no build up to anything in this story. A great part of most stories, and in a lot of YAs, is that there is a bit of a sense of urgency. There is at least some kind of time constraint, or there's something coming up in the future that you as the reader know about that the heroes have to be prepared for, but that's just not the case with this story. They're just kind of going through the motions and dealing with their own family and friend and relationship dramas, and then every now and then something exciting happens that puts them in danger. Anyway, that's probably all I really have to say about The Devouring Gray. I mean, it was a really good read. I really liked it, and I will be following on with the series. The ending of this book was pretty good. Not so much the climax. The climax felt a bit flat to me, but where it left off with each of their own little, the teenagers had each of their own little storylines with their own little cliffhangers. I really liked that. I think that was pretty creative, and I'm interested to see where it goes. All things considered, it's a pretty standard YA book. It goes through all the motions of a standard YA book. It ticks pretty much all of the boxes you would expect in a YA story. Not so much a problem, but, from time to time you like to see an author kind of be a bit more bold and go outside of the box, and Christine hasn't really done that so much, although she has used a creative spin on the small mysterious town trope, which I really like. The Devouring Gray gets 3 angsty teenagers out of 5. If you'd like to see some of my other reviews that I haven't done videos on, make sure you follow me on Goodreads. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Catcha.